Hi, my name is Kathy Folsom, and I want to welcome you all to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. It's May 16th, 2024. This meeting is being recorded, and I'm going to share my screen with some logistics. Hopefully everyone can see this. Everyone should be connected via audio broadcast upon entering this webinar. You're automatically muted. The presentation will be recorded and posted to our solid waste and recycling webpage, to the GRAC webpage, within a week. The agenda does hold time for public comment. Comments will be permitted in the time allotted for committee rules. There's 2 time periods at the discretion of the chair. And if you're having trouble with any aspect of the broadcast technical assistance, please contact Zoom. According to the bylaws on public comment, only the committee chair may recognize a public attendee. You can use the raise hand feature to indicate your desire to participate. There is also a designated time on each agenda to allow members of the audience an opportunity to speak to the committee. Once a public attendee is recognized by the chair, the response will relate only to the request made by the committee and may be subject to a time limit. And new business that arises or is suggested during the public comment period should be placed on the next meeting. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ashvin. And if you'd like me to take roll, I will.
Yes, please, Kathy. But good evening, everybody. Thanks all for making it here. It has been a couple of weeks or months since we've met, so it's good to see everybody. Hope your summers are going well. It seems to have started. Kathy, do we have a quorum now? Are we okay to continue?
We need to have 5 voting members, which 5 or more, and we do.
Okay, great.
Yes. Okay, so I'll take quick roll call. Chair Ashvin Nagaraja.
Here.
Vice Chair Sandra Smith.
Present.
Leslie Albert.
Present.
Hannah Carlson.
Here.
Christy Dyking.
Present.
Aaron Stein.
Present.
Myra is not here tonight, nor is Pete. Vinod Singh.
Present.
And Brian St. John.
Present.
With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Nagaraja.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, we can go ahead and go into GRAC communications and updates from Aaron.
All right, let me get to my notes here. So just a few general updates for you all this evening. First off is exciting news. We are moving forward with the process of hiring a new solid waste and recycling manager for our division here at Washington County. I heard today that the position could be posted as early as this Sunday and will remain open for a period of 3 weeks. We just really want to appreciate you all for your support and those of you that took the time to complete that survey. That certainly has informed our hiring process. We had over 30 responses from various stakeholders. So thank you for that. Once that posting does go up, we'll connect with you, and we would really appreciate you sharing that with your network as well, so we can spread this opportunity far and wide and work on hiring the next right leader for our department. So thank you. Other updates that I have this evening, to say that staff have been all but consumed with things around the Recycling Modernization Act would be an understatement. I would say it's certainly making up more than 50% of several of us current workload. So I just thought I'd give a high-level overview this evening And then with the meeting notes, I will provide Kathy a link to the DEQ's website. They have a wealth of information in there if you all wanted to start doing some research and think about topics that we might want to dive into a bit more potentially in the future. They have a lot of resources that have been coming along, including guides for local government. So first of all, Circular Action is the sole producer responsibility organization that submitted a plan to DEQ, and that plan is currently under review. We have until May 31st to provide public comment to DEQ on that plan. So staff have a process in place, and we are reviewing that in great detail, and we'll be working forward of bringing up any concerns, comments, or just places that we might need clarification on to Circular Action Alliance's attention. Concurrently with that, DEQ is undergoing their rulemaking process. Ideally, their draft rules will be finalized in June, and there will be a public comment period of 30 days. There will also be a public hearing that is currently scheduled for June 27th. Staff are also working on reviewing that with County Council with regards to how that impacts our current code and solid waste and recycling administrative rules. Additionally, we're looking at that from an operational perspective and connecting with leadership, as this could be pretty system changing operationally, some of these implications with this fairly quickly approaching launch date. July 1st of 2025 seems pretty far away, but when you understand the gravity of what is proposed, that 14 months is going to fly right by. The basics of RMA is that it's ever evolving, and it's really quickly moving from concept to reality. So local governments, our collection companies, staff, there's just a huge volume of industry experts really leaning heavily into this work. And here in the metro area, we are working to best coordinate so we all have like services. Even though this is statewide legislation, there will be some variances. The statewide legislation provides a basic level of service. We have the ability to provide additional services above and beyond that. So lots more to come on this. Ideally, I would see us coming back to you in the fall to do a formal presentation on this. Some things will be tightening up over these summer months, but certainly, as I mentioned, I'll share out the link. And then if you had any specific questions or things that we could look into on your behalf, we could work to address those. And then let's see, the last update I have this evening is related to Metro's recent rate increase. Metro convened a waste fee policy task force. This is in relation to the 2 public transfer stations that they operate and their cost of service. And through that policy task force, it was determined that they had been subsidizing disposal rates and are working to move through to a true cost of service model. With that, they proposed to Metro Council an 11.9% tip fee increase, and that was approved. So that will certainly have implications, I believe, and I don't have the effective date. I believe it's July 1st. I'd have to look that up for you. We certainly can put that in the notes. And with that, that is all the updates that I had for you all this evening.
Thanks, Erin. Do you just, as a baseline, like what the previous increases have been?
Last year was 11.2%. The prior year was the 17.9%. Overall, it's been almost a 45% increase over a period of 4 years. Don't quote me on that exact percentage. I have it documented somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay. Yeah, Brian, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, Aaron, I mean, you guys are the experts. Do you see this like hitting a plateau and normalizing, or do you feel like we're still in a lot of variability, metro, things could still be very unstable in the near future for 2025 and so on?
Well, yeah, let Kathy sat in, so let's let Kathy weigh in maybe.
So I represent Washington County with the Regional Waste Advisory Committee with Metro, with the RWAC. And this morning we actually talked about that because they did a presentation on the tip fee increases, and what, at least based on what we saw, and it appears that they're hoping that while there still will be increases, they will be smaller and more gradual, now that they're achieving that more true cost of service. Everything, what we heard this morning, that all of their rates and fees are cost of service with the exception of organics. Organics has about 400,000 a year that is subsidized. That it looks like was taken from their reserves in the last a year, and that's, I think, primarily because it's still the big chunk of materials that is in the waste stream. So
Thank you for the insight. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Kathy, did you have any updates?
do have
Discuss
a
the calendar.
couple. Yeah, first of all, I went to the Washington County Board work session on Tuesday and recommended the reappointment of Ashwin. And the board was very glad to move that forward to their regular meeting, which is 2 weeks, like May 28th, I believe, whereupon the formal appointment item will be put on the regular agenda. I did a little PowerPoint, and the other thing, they indicated really strong support for the GRAC, especially in light of the various things that are going on around rates and tip fees and transparency, transfer stations, and a whole host of other ideas. There were more than one of them, of the members of our board, that indicated that they were really happy to have this committee engaged with issues that will eventually probably come before them. So that was a good thing. In terms of the calendar, I'm hopeful to bring one of our county councils in front of this group to talk about public officials and public meetings and ethics. And there's been some changes at the state level, and I'm definitely not an attorney, so I couldn't tell you exactly what those changes are, but they can affect public meetings. I mean, I learned, for example, I never knew why I'm not a public official, so therefore I can talk to other coworkers about issues, but you folks are. And so there's very definite rules around when you need to provide notice to the general public and how many of you can meet and those kinds of things. So I think it would be really helpful to get it straight from the attorney perspective. So I'm hopeful if it isn't June, maybe in July. It's likely we'll take August off. We've done that the last few years. It's sort of hard to get, summer's hard enough as it is. And the way it looks right now, we don't have any action items in July. And then RMA is sometime fall. Right now I have it sitting in September, but it could be October, November, but somewhere in there we want to have a presentation on that. The board is also asked for an update in the fall. So whether it would be good to get a discussion from you, from the members of this committee, that we could then include with the presentation in front of the board. And then in December, it's the third, we've been doing 2 certificate reviews each year, and we've done half so far. There's 8 haulers, and we've done 4. So this year is the 3rd year of that. And it's Walker Garbage and SWAPCO this year. And that will leave Pride, Disposal, and Hillsborough Garbage for next year. And then a full cycle will have been done. That pretty much like consumes the December meeting, and that is an action item. So that's just a heads up there. And beyond that, been working with folks to try and come up with some other topical issues that we might bring some folks to do presentations on. But like Aaron said, right now, RMA seems to be consuming many of our work lives that we never knew were going to consume. So we're working things in, but that's all I got for now.
Thanks, Kathy. And thanks for that follow-up on the council. I know we raised some questions last time, so I appreciate you clarifying that so we can really understand the boundaries there. Yeah, and I think in terms of subjects, I think if folks have ideas on, I know we've canceled a couple of meetings, but it's, if people have things they want to hear about, I think having the committee work to kind of mold what that is more specifically would be helpful. We went through a lot of topics last year. I personally have run out of things because staff was really great about bringing all of those things in. So, if you do have an idea, please reach out to myself or Kathy. We can get something on the calendar for later this year. I think we're probably going to have less meetings just because staff is busy and we don't have topics. So, but if something does come up, I think we're all interested to meet and discuss it. So please bring it to our attention. Yeah, Vinod, do you have a question? Comment?
I'm just going to add that the plan that CAA put out right now, they know it's going to be returned to them and redone. So that might be a timing thing, like when the second plan comes out. As this one's being, this is sort of the test plan, and there's a lot of things being worked out in it. So
I thought of something too, Ashwin, that I was talking with our education outreach folks, and they thought maybe it might be good to revisit Beyond the Bin in light of sort of the priorities at reuse and some of the, sort of from a generator standpoint before it ever gets to recycling. And some of the folks on the committee didn't hear the first time. So if that's something that anyone's interested in, that's something I could get on our schedule as well.
Yeah, I'll need to look back at what that is to remind myself. But I think everything sounds interesting to me. I think it's just a matter of us getting what we want out of it. And so being kind of like precise about what we're trying to get. So I'll add it to the list of interested things. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, just as far as topics, I know the one thing that all my neighbors, and unfortunately more of my neighbors know I'm on this committee, the styrofoam committee or the styrofoam place that closed. I got so many questions about it. So the more information we can get about that, or talking about what, because there's no other options, right, for us. So I think that's like a really hot button topic if we could work that in the next few months somehow.
Yeah, it's a good point. I know some of the drop-off private companies are still accepting styrofoam, and I'm not sure what they're doing with it. So it might be good to understand that. Hannah, do you have a question?
Yeah, so styrofoam is on the PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization collection list. So that would be probably part of, at least in the future, that would be part of a discussion around materials that can be collected outside of curbside. So we'd hear about that in the RMA presentation at the very least. So it's hard to say, hold on to your styrofoam if you really want to recycle it till next summer. But at least I keep holding on to that thought and reminding people it's not the end of the world at the moment. It's just a blip in the system, unfortunately. But that's, yeah, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I also think it'd be nice to get an update on food scraps before we hit the full year to see how the progress of that is going. Understand that, from like cart set outs, at least, even if we don't have the tonnage, it'd be interesting. I personally have been enjoying that a lot, and so it'd be good to revisit that. Any other news from the committee? Anything that done recently? I did not make it out to the appreciation event. I don't know if other folks did. We would like to share that went well, or if there's any other like events going on that you want to bring up. We have time at the end as well, but if you do have anything. Otherwise, we can move on to the next item, which is oral communication. So we can open it up for the public if they want to make a comment. They can use the raise a hand feature. I think Kathy will promote them to speaking ability.
No one
See,
has,
Beth?
no one's
Yeah.
raised their hand.
And Beth, I see that you're here, so if you do have a comment in terms of the holler perspective, please do let us know. Otherwise, yeah, let's jump into the main topic of annual rate review.
Okay. Is everybody ready? I know I am. Give me just a moment. I'm going to share my screen here. Right, so I'm going to remove my interim manager hat and I'm going to place my operations supervisor hat back on for this evening for you all. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to present the 2024 rate review findings. In addition, staff are bringing to you a proposal for adding bulky item collection rates to our current suite of offerings. Just as a reminder, I know I was here recently to do a rate review refresher, but for those that may not be aware, we do conduct rate review each spring. The goal of conducting this annual analysis is to ensure community members are charged reasonable, fair, and just rates for essential garbage and recycling collection services. We do an in-depth review. It includes financial and programmatic data, which is supplied by our garbage and recycling collection companies. And it provides an opportunity for the county to ensure that each company is meeting the requirements of their certificate. This process is facilitated by a contracted CPA firm. The CPAs look for anomalies in the reported information. They recommend adjustments to align the reports with supporting documentation. They also take a look at year-over-year differences and industry trends for us. Staff report the findings to GRAC each May and make recommendations for rate changes that impact the system. The desired outcome this evening is for this committee to make a recommendation which will move forward to the board. Staff will then present the rate review findings to the board in the month of June. This year, we will attend a June 11th work session to introduce our findings, and we will return on June 25th. It's an evening meeting to receive approval to move forward with rate adjustments. After the presentation tonight, myself and I have Craig Pop and Tanya Moffett with Marina and Company here. We can answer questions about this year's outcomes, rate review practices in general, and any topics that you might have an interest in. So with that, I will dive in. So through our annual review of the detailed financial information brought to us in the form of a detailed cost report, all certificated collection companies are required to participate in the review process. Those companies that make up the top 25% of the system's revenue are subject to site visits. These are conducted either in person or virtually. And all certificate holders are subject to take a deeper dive if anomalies are found in those reports, or if staff need to lean into a specific topic or subject during the review process. Just as a recap, I wanted to briefly discuss the county's rate setting authority. We have Title 8.04 in our code, Section 320, 330, and 340 discuss rate provisions in detail. However, it is section 330 that gives our board the authority to institute rate changes for unincorporated Washington County. Pursuant to Washington County Code, WCC 8.04.330A, the annual rate review process ensures that any garbage and recycling collection rate changes, either increases or decreases, are just, fair, reasonable, and sufficient to provide proper service to the public while also allowing for a reasonable return to the certificate holders. The methodology that the county utilizes is a return on revenue methodology. This is a standard approach for establishing the appropriate profit margins and regulated solid waste collection systems, as they do not require significant capital expenditures or investments. If the prior year's system ROR is more or less than the target, our target is currently 10%, then the financial performance of each line of business, we have 3, residential, commercial, and Dropbox compactor, will be further evaluated to determine the areas of under or over financial performance. The goal of this process is to set uniform collection rates, which provide revenues that cover all the allowable collection costs, plus a profit margin for the collection companies. It's worth noting that variations do occur between rural and urban areas, for example, or lines of service. And I think it's also worth noting that this is not a weighted average based on size of hauler service area. We take the total composite and everyone has an equal average rate rolled up into the return on revenue model. Tonight, before we take a look at my recommendations, I thought it was worth noting, staff each year pool general rates from the metro area. This data was published April of 2024. We pulled these rates, and Washington County is on the left-hand side of the table. I know it may be hard to see on your screen. And then other metro region jurisdictions are off to the right. For Washington County and Tualatin, because we do have a $2 recycling surcharge for the purposes of comparison, I have rolled that in on this table, but you'll note that Washington County does have the second lowest rates in the region. Part of that reason is that we have very low gross receipt requirements. So we collect 3% gross receipt revenue on all of the system. Most of these other jurisdictions, their baseline is a 5% up to 10%. So that annually just has upward pressure on the rates. Okay, on to our findings. So for 2023, the total system revenue was $42,944,749. The total income or profit derived from the system was $2,257,282, resulting in a return of revenue of 5.26%. When we look at each individual line of service, the residential or our can cart model came in at 5.65%, commercial or containerized at 1.69%, and Dropbox and compactor at 8.13%. Overall, the system underperformed by $2.2 million. When we're looking at year-over-year changes, our revenue did increase 1.6 million or 4% over prior year. However, our operational cost increased at a rate of 6%, equaling 2.1 million. Some of the causes for low returns on revenue are related to, were actually correlated to the direct cost of service, increased disposal and recycling processing costs, vehicle repairs and depreciation were the top changes year over year. Our indirect costs were mostly stagnant year over year. They actually decreased slightly by about 20K. And just for reference back to last year's overall return on revenue, we were at 6.35%.
Can we pause on that slide for a minute?
Oh, hold on. Sometimes
Sorry.
things in Adobe don't work. It's fine. We can go back. Yes.
I know I'd asked you about this, but just wanted to get your comment on, I think looking at the past couple of years, residential and commercial were typically about the same. And in terms of like the pass-through fees, like from like Metro, is the 11% from this that was approved already in there, or is that not in there?
Not in there. We don't do projections, but there was a 11.2% rate increase that went into effect last summer. So that certainly is reflected in these rates, that higher processing cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting passed through.
Yes, it's the last year's 11%.
And also,
Yeah.
to be fair, not to specifically point this at Metro, all the regional, even the private transfer stations set rates, and some of them even have rates that are higher than the Metro rate. So
Yeah, and
Metro
then,
has just kind of been seen as the market leader for setting the rates in the region.
yeah. And you also mentioned an increase in depreciation of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean like new equipment was purchased? Because I think depreciation usually like is consistent over year. So an increase would indicate like new equipment purchases, or
Yes, so several of our haulers had been waiting on trucks for a number of years, and they did come in the last quarter. So it's not reflective of full year, but certainly those are big capital expenses that hit the system.
mm-hmm. Okay. And then the increase, like, so typically since the pass-through fees, I would think affect residential and commercial about the same. The fact that commercial is seeing worse indicates some additional factors there. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I one thing I noticed, sorry, there's a spider who's actually trying to just land on my lap. So give me 2 seconds. My apologies. Okay, he just came out of my ceiling. Okay, anyways, back on track. I noticed that tonnage for the commercial sector was down, but mileage and truck and labor hours are up. So that affects their earnings, right? So there's less waste moving through the system. Therefore, even though they have to maybe run those same commercial routes, it just compounds the revenue factors.
Mm-hmm. Does it mean like they're having to go, is it the equivalent in residential of like an empty cart being there where they have to go and pick up the cart, but there's nothing in there? Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, and I think we saw this when COVID happened, and we saw a huge shift of tonnage into the residential sector and away from the commercial sector. There was more of a delta between those two lines of service. But it does kind of always, if you look at the rate history for the last 10 years, when we mapped it out, it's kind of a wave effect, right? There's peaks and valleys, and we're earning and then we're under earning. It hasn't been like a straight trajectory for the last
Mm-hmm.
decade. And they don't always follow each other.
Yeah, I only looked at the past 3 years. Just curious. Okay, thank you, Aaron. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, when you were doing this on the commercial side, are you noticing I'm worried there's like this spiral effect of like commercial business just getting less and less and less, right? I'm not trying to read ahead and spoil your main line here. But I'm just curious, was there any thought about, maybe this is a new normal where commercial is really going to be dropping more and more, and because I know COVID, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but like, with COVID, like work at home seems to be more of the normal now. Does that make sense?
It
I just want
does.
thoughts on that. Like, do you think this is something that maybe we have to adjust this overall process in the near future? Maybe not next year, but maybe a couple of years from now or something about how we weight it between residential, commercial, and Dropbox?
Well, I will tell you that we may have to be adjusting this process with RMA because we will have an influx of funding coming into the system that will impact rates. With regards to commercial, we have seen RORs this low in the past. I'm not an economist, so I would need to get
Right.
some additional support to really look into that and do some further assessment. Nothing unusual really jumped out. It just seems that costs are going up, and every year we're seeing that in our results, and it's just hard to
Well,
keep
there's a lot
pace
of
with that, particularly just the last 2 years. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next slide? And I can go back to full screen too. Okay, so when it comes down to our rate review process, we have an established target of 10%. And as I mentioned, the system performed by a little under $2.2 million. So when we look at each sector, we have to determine what amount of revenue is required to return the system back to a 10%. So overall, when we look at the residential sector, we're looking at about $1.4 million is needed, so 4.8%. And so to think about that in terms of what it means for the average ratepayer, off the base rate, that's an increase of about $1.33 per month if they're taking a 32-gallon can cart service. For the urban customer, the new base rate is going to be $28.74 plus the $2 recycling surcharge. For our rural customers with the 32-gallon cart, they would be looking at $28.70 plus the $2 recycling surcharge. So then if we look at the commercial line of service, we need an additional $744,000 in revenue. That would be a required increase of 9.2%. That averages out to be about $25 increase on a 4-yard container size. So a 4-yard container customer will see a new rate of $297.02. And when you add the 4% recycling surcharge onto that, you're at $308.90. And then lastly, when we look at Dropbox, they slightly underperformed, $127,000 in revenue. We're looking at a 2.1% rate increase. Overall, that is a increase of $3.79 per haul on a 10-yard Dropbox. That means the new haul rate will be $184.11. And then in addition to that, the rate increases do apply to other applicable fees around Dropbox services, such as mileage and setup fees. And then I was going to look at,
Aaron, can I ask a question?
yes, and I'm pulling up
when-
last year's data because I wanted to see where we were at last year as well.
Yeah, I was curious. And when we increase the 35-gallon fee, we also increase the everything else, right? Service fees, collection
Yeah.
fees,
Yes.
extra fees by the same percentage.
Yes, across the board. We don't weight it. So when we look at last year's increases, residential had a return on revenue of 3.60. And so we did the 96-cent increase on the base rate But if you remember, we also implemented the food scraps program. And so urban saw a slightly higher increase of 53%. And then commercial last year had a return on revenue of 3.19%. And Dropbox and Compactor were at 7.6%. So two sectors slightly down, and then Dropbox is slightly up year over year. So just some key considerations as far as rate setting goes, and the message that we always carry forward to the board is that there are so many variables that impact our rates and our system. And so when we're considering any rate adjustments, whether they're up or down, we need to look at things like our system impacts. We need to look at disposal cost, methods of collection and transportation have processors changed, so haulers are driving greater distances. We want to assess the local wage scales. It's really important that we ensure that our collection companies are able to pay living wages and have strong benefits. We'll look at things like investment of facilities and equipment. As you brought up the depreciation, there's still a large volume of trucks that are on back order. And if a glut of those hits the system in 2024, if those are delivered, then we'll see those types of impacts in future conversations about rates. We also do take into consideration a reasonable return on revenue for the haulers, which has been this 10% target for about a decade. And then lastly, we look at programmatic changes. As I mentioned, in 2023, we started the food scrap program. So we built in some cost considerations in the rate for that. And then back in 2022, we allowed for some additional revenue to enter the system by not adjusting the residential rate down to prepare for the reduced rate program.
Aaron, on the equipment side of things, is there like a criteria of which they're like can and cannot order new trucks? I know there's also like electric trucks coming in that I know are expensive. How is that like considered reasonable, or how do we determine if that's a reasonable expense?
Yeah, so we could talk to Marina a bit more about that. They have some baseline cost for allowable cost that are looked at. So for example, even disposal, maybe a particular hauler uses a disposal site that costs a bit more in the tip fee, but if they were to spend the time and labor to drive to a different location, it balances out. And so they have these reasonability benchmarks on a lot of things. But yeah, the cost of trucks, even since I've been with the county, I don't know. I think there's some haulers in the audience tonight. They could probably actually speak better to the true cost and those increases that they've seen, but we don't have a cap. It's just, we need to make sure that the equipment is in good running order. And on top of that, allowable expenses do include maintenance and servicing. So there's an offset there if you're paying too much in maintenance, where it might just make sense to upgrade that fleet.
I guess I'm wondering in the context of when you aggregate all the data and you have different haulers that are, say competing to have the lowest cost, right? If one hauler buys more trucks, I guess it doesn't necessarily affect the rest of the system. It just affects their return on revenue. Is that?
Yes. And I would say if everybody got new trucks, we would see a blip in that, right? That's a big expense, but typically it's a staggered approach. Again, I would invite, and Tanya, actually,
Yeah.
our rate consultant, has her hand up. We could certainly let her speak to that.
Yeah. Can we
Yeah.
promote her?
We can. Is she promoting? Yes, there we go.
Okay, I'm going to leave my camera off because I have sketchy Wi-Fi tonight, so have to bear with me. So typically, to answer this question, typically what we see is when haulers have newer vehicles, they have higher depreciation, and then they have lower like repairs and maintenance costs on their vehicles. And so typically it balances out. And so then when haulers have an older fleet, typically they have more repairs and maintenance on their vehicles. So, and like Aaron just stated, we do not have a cap in the county for like when haulers can purchase new vehicles or things like that.
So when we say that there was an increase in depreciation, it could be either new trucks or increased maintenance. It's not necessarily one or the other. Is that
Correct, that's true.
okay? Oh, thanks for that answer.
Okay. Maybe we'll
Sorry to
just leave
keep stopping you,
Tanya.
Aaron.
No, it's all good. We'll leave Tanya here because I'm sure there'll be more questions and I am very close to wrapping up my actual presentation part. I also apologize for the unruly pets in the background if you can hear those. Hopefully my earbuds are well enough that you can. Okay, so a huge thing that we've been asked to do is to come back to the board with how year one of our reduced rate program went. If you all will remember, we implemented that program on January 1st of 2023. So we actually have a full year of programmatic data. And when we launched this reduced rate program for unincorporated Washington County, we established some success criteria. We wanted it to be self-funded, provide long-term and ongoing relief, make sure it was easy to apply for, and provides equal level services to all customers in the county. And then most importantly, we wanted to make sure it provides meaningful and needed assistance. So I just thought I'd give a little bit background about the criteria around the program, and then we can talk about some of the financials that came out of year one. So we have right around 67,000 single family resident households in unincorporated Washington County. When we modeled for this program, we estimated about 20% or 13,000 households in Washington County were at the federal poverty level. And then of those, based on other like assistance programs, we estimated that 15% of the eligible households would actually participate in the program. So we were anticipating about 2,000 households participating at peak performance. So we actually projected this to ramp up over the course of 4 years. And in year one, we had predicted 500 households would be approved and receiving financial assistance. If that household was receiving assistance for that full year, that would be about a $204,000 impact on the system. So our actuals for year one were 667 households approved. And we didn't track month by month, but we do have some quarterly data. And so we're estimating that the year one's financial impact is around $221,000. What that means to the average ratepayer is that is a bump of about 25% per month in the rate, or $3 annually. And looking back to where we thought this would be at peak performance, that the average ratepayer, if we had 2,000 people on the program, they would pay an additional $8.35 per month. So overall, last year we saw very steady program growth for the reduced rate program, but it really peaked in mid-2023 with our launch of our spring newsletter, which actually goes out countywide. And then with our rate increase notices that went out on July 1st, we had links to that program. And I think our key takeaway from year one is that partnerships are really important. We have contracted with Community Action to administer this program. It relieves our collection companies and the county from managing households' personal financial data. And it also provides like a natural pathway for community members that are maybe seeking assistance for rent or other types of utilities. We can be an add-on option. And I think it's also worth noting that several other jurisdictions in Washington County have adopted similar programs, and those were implemented. The city of Hillsborough implemented in December of 2023, and then the city of Beaverton put theirs in place this February of 2024. So we are really blanketing the community with this type of support, which is great. And with that, that's a little bit about our equity and rate setting and the update we'll be providing to the board.
Aaron, you say $3 right now per year, and then at peak it'd be $8 per year per customer.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Brian, do you have a question also?
Yeah, I first of all love this, and I love seeing the adoption. But I do want to double click on a few things. The households. Do you have any data on the household size? Because I know the federal poverty level is set based on household size, correct?
It is. So we don't. That's submitted to Community Action, and then they self-identify how many members are in that household.
Okay. Any thoughts around the 185%? Is that enough? Because I think adjusted, it's like in the 45,000 range. What if I did my math right for like 2 people or something like that? Do we feel like, because everything's going up, right? And I want to make sure that, you know, as prices go up, you know, people are not, you know, impacted here if we can help it. Any thoughts around that, or is it just too early to know if the 185% is the right number?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The reason we landed on 185% really has to do with the conditional eligibility and helping to keep the program costs down. We had interviewed a number of different aid organizations, including TriMet, and TriMet had a benchmark of 200%. Unfortunately, with that eligibility criteria, they couldn't rely on the conditional eligibility that we've been able to rely on. And if you'll note on the slide, over 45% of our approvals have come through that direct partnership with Community Action, where the other 55% have come either through the haulers or through our website. So I think this just kind of highlights having that conditional approval is really key. It doesn't mean we don't have to adjust it in the future. It's feasible. There would just be some additional administrative costs. Currently, our administrative costs are fairly low. I think year one, we were at right around $30,000 for all the applications processed. And I didn't write down the total number of applications, but we had 667 households approved, and I think we processed around 1,100 applications. To be fair, with Hillsborough and Beaverton coming online, I've seen less rejections because most people were applying for the program outside the service area. So we're seeing some balance there, and some of those administrative costs should be coming down for us.
And my last question is, you talked about 2,000 over a 4-year period. We were at 667 for the first year. I just wanted to ensure, you know, anyone who listens or is watching, you know, if we hit the cap, you know, does that mean the program is shut down? I mean, what is there, like, it's okay, we have a buffer, we'll just absorb it and adjust? I just want to understand what happens, because I love that, you know, people are using this resource who need it. I just hate to think that all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're out of luck because you're the 2001 person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think the way we structured this is we built it into our system. We do not have a hard cap because there is no separate funding mechanism. It is funded by the ratepayers that are currently paying into that system. It may need to be a policy consideration, or we may need to make some adjustments, have conversations about that if we get to it being an overly burdensome. You know, do we have to adjust criteria or not? But I know we're only in year one, but I feel pretty confident in our model. When you look at larger, more established federal programs, a very high participation rate at a federal program is 20%. The average is 10 to 15. So for now, I think we're good. And this will just be one of those pulse points that we continue to model. I think it's also important to note that people come on and people also come off. They've moved. Conditions change as well. So there's going to be some flux and variance as we roll along through this process.
Perfect. I just love to know that, I love hearing that we can absorb and be ready and there's no, hard, stop type of thing. So love that. So thanks for the info. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and just to clarify, there are some jurisdictions that have put a hard cap, but definitely the way we've structured this, we do not have a hard cap. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you all about this evening is leaning into our rate transparency goals. We have adopted Metro Regional Waste Plan Goal 14, which states adopt rates for all services that are reasonable, responsive to users' economic needs, regionally consistent, and well understood. So staff, in conjunction with haulers and with speaking with some other local jurisdictions, are proposing tonight that we would come up with a new structure for collecting bulky waste items en route. It's going to consist of per item pricing. The rates are set by size and weight, and it's a two-step fee structure with a pickup fee and a cost per item. Furthermore, this is not only going to be available to urban and rural residential customers, this is also open to commercial customers as well. So if you're thinking maybe multifamily properties that have bulky waste to dispose of. And then in conjunction with that, we're working on a number of rate-related web updates, and that would be including a new bulky item collection disposal rate page, and it's going to have some additional resources. And I just would like to note that our current process, this is a service that is available, but it is a hourly fee of $75 with disposal billed on top of that. And there is a lot of variation amongst the haulers and the disposal sites on what customers are billed for, say, to get a couch picked up.
Oh, just real quick, a bulky item, is that like a dishwasher or something, or what are we talking here?
It is. It can be a dishwasher. It could be a bicycle. It could be a couch, a bed.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
I do have some examples on this next slide. And this is actually an excerpt of what our proposed rates are. And when we developed this, we really wanted it to make it simple for a customer to use and identify what item they may have for disposal. We calculated each cost based on size and weight, use actually moving truck standards. They have great tables that they utilize. And using a combination of hourly labor rates, and disposal cost, we came up with these proposed rates. So the idea is that extra large items that are a certain size and weight, regardless of what that is, you would be charged $39 for disposal. So if I'm an urban customer, and I need my king size mattress and box springs picked up, I'm going to look at my rate sheet. I'm going to know that I'm going to pay $39 for that item's disposal, and then I have a $16 pickup fee. So in total, I'm looking at $55 to have that picked up at the end of my driveway. I think what's great about this is the en route component of this. You can call your collection company directly, and they will get the list of items that you have and give you a per rate fee, where before there was some ambiguity. It was like, well, depending on how much time we were there and then the actual weight of the item, then we'll get back to you with the cost. So this kind of tightens that up. These are the categories, and most items in your household will easily fit into one of these categories. And the categories we've gone with are extra large items, large items, medium and small. We also do have considerations for white goods, which are your appliance items. So if you have something that's containing a coolant, that does cost a bit more. But your appliance items are actually going for recycle. And then we have electronic options that are curbside. These also are going for recycle. And then tires. We have a huge issue with tires in this community being dumped illegally. So hopefully with a convenient option, we can get those items picked up. So in general, I'm super excited about this. I think this should be a big barrier relief for those that don't have a pickup truck to help to self-haul to the dump. On top of that, a lot of our self-haul facilities have very high minimums. So if I just have a barbecue grill that is past its life, I don't want to have to spend $85 to haul that to my local dump. I would prefer to have that just picked up at the end of my driveway for a reasonable fee. So I just really appreciated the support of our haulers and helping us prepare these. And yeah, certainly excited to hear your feedback on this as well tonight.
Yeah, I think this is nice, Aaron. I think it's clear, and comparing to stuff I've done, had to get stuff disposed of recently through private places, the price seems reasonable. So I think that is good. So you're saying you worked with the haulers on this already, and they're in support of the structure and implementation across the board?
Yep, we worked with the rate consultants. This type of model is already happening in Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tualatin, one other jurisdiction, more in the south part of the county. I don't have it off the top of my mind. So it's not a new model, but it certainly will be new for our customers, and certainly look forward to having it like as a resource that we can share. And I think anything that leads to transparency in our rates, and then that leads to less confusion when it comes to the back end with billing and us trying to sort things out for customers who may be confused.
So is it equivalent in structure and price to our neighboring counties?
Yeah, our price is probably a little bit lower because I actually wasn't able to get the specific methodologies that they utilized. I was able to use the weight to come up with these rates. So it skews a little bit lower on the cost per item. And compared to some, it's significantly lower. So kind of just depends on the item. But ideally, the methodology I use could be duplicated too, if needed. So.
And so as of August 1st, this will go in as part of the structure and people can start using the service.
That's our proposal to you all and to carry forward to the board.
Great. Any questions or comments from the committee on this?
Oh, I love this. I think this is brilliant.
Well, I'd love to take that brilliance as my own idea, but it's not. It's duplicating a really good idea for the benefit of our ratepayers. Okay, I think I'm to my last slide. Okay, so on to our staff recommendations. So overall, staff is recommending rate increases for residential, commercial, and Dropbox compactor lines of services. Our goal would be to have a residential rate increase of 4.8%, a commercial rate increase of 9.2%, and a Dropbox compactor rate increase of 2.1%. Additionally, staff are recommending the implementation of a bulky waste collection menu, all rates to be effective on August 1st of 2024. And with that, I can revert back to any slides that you might want to look at again or answer any questions. I know we've got Tanya in here with us, and we can ask Craig to pop in too if we need to.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I'm sure a lot of work went into this, so appreciate it. And any questions, comments from the committee, especially on the bulky waste? I'm guessing they could be single action item. If we felt so, but if people have any concerns, I'd like to hear it before we get to that point. Go ahead, Sandra.
I was just gonna offer my random thoughts. I read all of this beforehand, and when I opened it up, I was a little disappointed to see that we had missed the target again this year. I thought, I was hoping we wouldn't have to raise fees. And thanks, Aaron, for explaining. I thought we were doing projections and that we had included the tipping fee that we knew about last year in the rates, but I see we don't. So that makes sense now. I was going to question all that, but it makes sense. I do have a question. The Recycle Plus in revenue or fail or pass or whatever it's doing has no effect on the rates, correct? It's still in that way.
Yeah, we did isolate Recycle Plus and the cost. So we are leaving the rates as is for that program, and those financials are not impacting the overall rates.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I think.
Same applies to medical waste. We are leaving the medical waste rates as is, no adjustments.
Right. I think that's everything.
Right?
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little bit like Sandra. I've got a few thoughts. First of all, Aaron, well done. You and your team. I know this is a massive lift. Presentation, very clean, very easy to understand. Loved it. Super happy about the bulky cleanup. I know it's not your idea, but getting it here and implementing it, that is brilliant, because it's going to make it so much easier. I know I've got a bunch of stuff because I've been dreading going hauling it away. So I'm like, boom, as soon as that goes live, I'm going to be going there. Love that the reduced rate program, we talked about that earlier. My one watch out, I'm really worried about the whole commercial thing. In my private work and stuff, I deal with commercial real estate and stuff like that. It is very unstable. And I'm just worried that revenue thing, we're going to be back here next year and it could be 12% or 15% or some kind of major miss. So I'm super worried about that. And then to Sandra's, concern, I think we're going to be back here next year, with the Metro thing, right? Because they just announced a new increase. We know it's going to hit, and next year we're going to have to raise rates again. I think let's just be, kind of transparent and clear and blunt about it a little bit. But I think that's just where we're at, guys, right? It's just the nature of the universe and things are settling out that way. That's why I asked my question about the Metro, and hopefully that settles and then, stuff gets, slower as far as hitting us. But I think we're going to be unfortunately here again. Okay, that's me ranting. I'll stop now.
Yeah, I will say I was happy to see the residential increase was not too much. I'm always worried it's going to be much higher, especially with the way the rates of other public utilities have been going. So it's never great to raise rates, but it's good to see that it's not too far off.
Yeah, I think there's been considerations of, biannual rate reviews and what does it look like to mix it up in the system. And to me, as a ratepayer, I would rather have small incremental rates increases over time versus getting one of those ouch letters because I haven't seen that. So from my perspective, and I think from the community's perspective, the fact that we do this process annually and we just truly look back at 1 year's cost, it helps control. And certainly I've seen that as we've modeled the history of how things have been over the last decade as well, that overall things kind of level out over time.
I have a question for the Marina folks as well. Just curious in terms of, you could tell us in terms of trends you're seeing for yard waste since we've implemented the food scraps collection, if we have any idea if we're seeing more. I know we don't have a full year's worth of data and maybe we don't have the complete data set, but do we know anything in terms of the adoption of that, if that is affecting like number of cart set outs as predicted previously? Because I think the adoption of that is good. And do we need more? Do we need to reach out more to people to get more adoption to make sure that the tonnage is moving in that direction? Would be interesting to me. And then the second one is if there's any comments on like the percentage of extra fees and quantity of that across the system. If we know, are we seeing a trend or a substantial portion of the I know that's all tied into the revenue. Is it like that a substantial portion of the revenue, and if it's possible to comment on whether that's evenly distributed across the haulers, or if are we seeing, certain regions or something specific about that?
It's for your second question. So you're asking kind of the additional fees, the side fees, are we kind of tracking that separately from the typical bundled residential? Sorry.
Yeah,
Make sure.
do we know what percentage of the revenue in the system that the extra fees is making up? The extra, like the people who are sending out bags next to their cans, the happy can fees. How much of the revenue is due to that, and is it evenly distributed across the haulers?
Yeah. So so we only focus really on the collections fees, which includes all those side fees. We focus on the surplus, or the surcharge, which is the $2 material sales. So if recycling, they were able to sell recycling material back to the processors. And then we look at other income as well, which it could be the sale of capital assets, some other miscellaneous revenues. We don't focus on some of those other fees, additional set outs, those types of things. We could roughly calculate it based off of the fee itself and the number that they report in the program data. But it would be a rough kind of estimate as far as what that would be. Some of that information kind of fluctuates from company to, or from hauler to hauler. So we could calculate that out. We mostly focus on the number of set outs, the number of additional cans and carts, the will calls. We focus on the actual physical number of those, the program data. So we usually calculate more or focus more on that in terms of variance. So did that go up from last year to this year? Sometimes that information isn't entirely accurate on the DCR, so we have to follow up with the haulers as well. So I think in the case of residential set outs, one of the haulers was missing its number of set outs, additional set outs. So once we got that in there, the variance wasn't as significant between 22 and 23. But we don't really focus solely on some of those actual revenue line items. We focus more kind of larger macro collection revenue. So,
Yeah, is the additional set out the will call? Is that?
So sometimes, there is a will call. They can do that as well, but there's also like if you had an initial bag on the side, if you filled up your garbage can, and you had an additional bag, you can set that on the side, I believe, and the driver would have to get out to load that up though. So I think that's part of that fee. There's also same with like yard debris, if they had yard debris stuff, but I don't think that is an additional charge for that. But
Yeah, so you saying you do track that additional bag because that requires the hauler to get out and actually lose some time on that. And so have you seen like trends in terms of that?
Well, I will tell you, year over year, we went from 45,000 extra bags in 2022 to 117,000 extra bags in
part of that
2023.
Part of that was an error on the program stats though. I went back and looked at one of the DCRs from 2022 and they didn't report it. And so that was one of the things we followed up in during the 2022 report. And that number was missing from there. So when I added that was roughly 69,000 of it. So once I added that, it was off by like 7,000 or 8,000 increase. Yeah. So
I had a heart attack when I read that this morning. I was like, okay, that's a lot of re-education that needs to happen.
We don't focus on it as much. We mostly focus on, hey, your additional set outs from last year deviated significantly, or maybe your driver hours or different things like that. We'll look at program data to make sure that's consistent, because a lot of that does factor into how we're approaching a revenue increase or revenue decrease or cost increase. We'll try to compare and make sure both are kind of aligned. And so you're not seeing a reduction in the number of set outs, and then you're seeing a increase in revenue or increase in costs. And so usually we try to make sure those are in line, and it sometimes does require a revision in what their program data is, or maybe they're pulling it in a certain way, or there is a calculation error or something like that. So we do try to, from year to year, adjust that program data to make sure it is accurate, so that going to 23 it's consistent, and we can rely on 22 to make some comparisons.
Thanks. And from that, are you able to tell from like yard waste, are we seeing additional set outs? Because at least, even though we don't have a full year, we did have the winter time where I would think you would see more set outs if people are doing food waste.
So
I don't-
additional,
Sorry, this is Tanya. I don't think that we specifically looked into that detail this year,
No,
just because we didn't have a full year of information. We could go back and look and see what we can find, because it's the information that we get is annual based, so it's not like by quarter or things like that. So sometimes it's hard to see some of that stuff.
So you can't like trend month by month and things like that
Correct.
to see. Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
staff have not been like, so for the reduced rate program, we asked for special reporting from our haulers for all of last year, so we could monitor it by quarter in real time. And so it's a bit different. We have not asked for additional tracking or monitoring with food scraps. We just assumed after we had a full year, we would be able to see that system shift if it's there.
Yeah, that's fair. I was just curious if we were on target to see what we were expecting.
we did ask, that's one of the questions I ask when I go out there to the site reviews, and some of the callers are still kind of adapting to this now. They're adjusting kind of how they're setting the routes. You know, some of the other jurisdictions have had this for a while where it was mixed, and so now they can send a truck out to collect from both unincorporated Washington County and Beaverton, you know, so it does create some efficiencies where they were sending out a specific truck just to collect the yard debris only, as opposed to the mixed. So I think there is some adjustments that's still taking place, and that they're trying to work through this. So it may take another couple months, or we may see it a little bit more in 24 where there's a larger impact to the system. So yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. It is
Yeah,
complex system.
It is
Yes.
very yeah, there's a lot to it, right? Yeah. So
We'll be patient then and wait till next year. Thank you both. Thanks for all your work on this.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from committee or even public attendees? Please raise your hand. We can get you in. If not, we can go to vote on the action items. Kathy, are you able to do a roll call? I think I need a motion to.
You need a motion first.
Yeah.
and a
I was
second.
going to make a motion to adopt the recommendations.
Yeah. Do you have a
I'd like to
second?
second the motion.
Am I allowed a second?
And a third from Vinod.
Okay, so I will call your name and please vote yes, no, or abstain. So beginning with Chair Ashwin Nagaraja,
Yep, I'll vote yay to adopt staff recommendations.
Vice Chair Sandra Smith,
Vote yes.
Leslie Albert,
Same here, yes.
Hannah Carlson,
Yes.
Christy Dykey, I'll come back to Christy. She's and we'll see if we can fix the audio. Vinod Singh
Aye.
and Brian St. John.
I vote aye.
And that leaves Christy. Can you, yeah. We,
Christie
Turn
votes
down.
yes.
okay. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ayes and 0 nays.
Great. Well, that concludes the agenda. We can go to the last item of oral communication. If there's any other comments from the public attendees, you can use the raise a hand feature. Doesn't look like it. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you staff. Thank you Marina for all the work that went into this. Aaron, I think the pre-meeting ahead of this too, to go over the rate setting procedure was really helpful. I think it got us in a good mindset to get into this meeting and get through it quickly. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
So
no problem.
we can adjourn. Have a good evening, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.